Okay, welcome to the July 5th, 2017 City of Morro Bay's Water Reclamation Facility Citizens Advisory Committee. We have, it looks like, a quorum here. Paul Donnelly is absent, but everyone else is in attendance. So we're going to call this, excuse me? Oh, excuse me, I'm Barbara Spagnola. Thank you very much. So we'll call this meeting to order. And if we could, please have a moment of silence. Thank you, and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, are there any announcements or presentations? I'll start with the advisory committee. Any announcements? Yes, Jenny? Okay.
So I just have two quick announcements. One, I just wanted to give a quick update on EPA's WIFIA program. I've mentioned this in the past. This is basically funding through EPA for water infrastructure projects, and I have a press release that just came out last month, and basically what it says is that the program received an additional $8 million for credit subsidy that was signed into law by President Donald Trump on May 5th, 2017, and with this additional funding combined with the $17 million appropriated for credit subsidy in December 2016. This will allow the program to lend approximately $1.5 billion for water infrastructure projects. And as some of you may recall, what was involved is the City of Morro Bay needed to send a letter to express interest in receiving this funding, and what I wanted to do is just let you know that there were only 43 letters of interest nationwide. So I would hope that Morro Bay has a pretty good chance at getting some of this money. And I had a quick question to Rob. Have you heard anything back from EPA yet?
Other than they wanted to clarify whether we're still interested, and we responded, yes, we're still interested. Great.
The only other thing I wanted to mention again is to tell folks about EPA's website. This is for basically infrastructure projects, and the one thing I wanted to mention is about a compendium of funding sources for small and rural wastewater systems. I've mentioned this in the past, but it's really nice to see all the grants and funding sources are in one spot. So I would encourage people to take a look at the website. And that is epa.gov/Water Finance Center. And in addition, there's a ton of information regarding rate structures and user fees and case studies of sustainable water and wastewater pricing. So that's it for my announcements.
I have one here. If I could bring your attention to the overhead. There's several citizens in the community that are very concerned about the runaway cost for the sewer project, and I would encourage everybody to get educated and understand what is really happening with this project and how it's progressing. There is a Gmail. It's Citizens for Affordable Living at gmail.com. That's Citizens for Affordable Living at gmail.com. If you want to keep abreast of the different issues that have coming up. One of the reasons for this is there's several people, me included, have been frustrated. We've been involved in this for about a dozen years already, and I think that it's imperative that the community get involved and get educated. Thank you.
Okay, staff, any presentations or announcements? Okay, moving on to public comment, and see a lot of faces in the crowd. That's great. Just for procedure, this is public comment for items not on the agenda, and we have a pretty large item about the water reclamation facility on the agenda. So if you wish to talk about something other than that, please come forward to the mic, say your name, and discuss what you would like to discuss. But we were going to reserve time for comments on the project when we get to that agenda item. So with that being said, any items not on the agenda that anyone would like to discuss?
I think that you should clarify that if somebody might have to leave, they can talk about.
We're going to wait until we get to the item because we're going to get to it.
Well, according to the
30
Brown
seconds.
Act, according to the Brown Act, they can talk pretty much about anything they want in public comment.
Okay, with that, I'm going to close public comment and move on to the consent calendar. And the first item is A1, and that's the meeting minutes. Any comments or corrections, or would we like to just get a motion and second?
On the minutes in the public comment section where I brought up a couple of the issues, I would just like to have a little clarification on page 1 where it says Richard Sadowski noted that 301H, I said a waiver. It's the waiver which allows less than secondary treated sewage to be dumped out of the ocean outfall. But if you could just put in waiver and then also just state that it's been in effect since the 1980s. And that the Cayuga Sanitary District and the city have made significant investments. And that it's been operating better than when it was first constructed. Other than that, I have no issue.
There's a time for the public to speak when we have the item. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So, any other comments on it? Okay. Then public comment. Anyone from public comment like to come forward, please?
Good afternoon. I hope everybody had a snap, crackle, and pop wonderful 4th of July, even though we didn't have fireworks. My name is Carol Truesdale. I live in North Morro Bay, and on page 329, Larry Truesdale's name is spelled incorrectly. It's T as in Tom, R-U-E, S as in Sam, D-A-L-E. Please make that correction for the record. Thank you.
Okay, so do we have a motion and a second based on the amendments?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, just for discussion, staff, will you review the comments made by Mr. Sadowski and make sure he added a bunch of stuff that may or may not have been said? Just want to make sure that that was actually said, and if it was, reflect that. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries unanimously. Then we move on to item B1, and this is a report on the Public Works Cost Review Workshop. So I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rob Livick, Public Works Director, here to introduce this item. You may notice that there are several City Council members in the audience. They are here to listen and learn, but per direction from the city's attorney, not to provide any commentary or discussion on the project. Also with us today is our new interim city manager, Martin Lamelli. His first WRFCAC meeting as interim city manager, certainly not his last. So welcome, Mr. Lamelli, to the audience.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. We're resident of Morro Bay, and I have lots to learn about this project, and I hope to get up to speed with it.
With that, this report is based on direction from the City Council at the April 25th meeting to look at a couple of specific alternatives and to convene a peer review panel to review the project and make cost savings recommendations. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rickenbach of the MKN JFR team to make the presentation. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. What we're here to do is present the results of a report that's part of your staff report and explain a little bit of how what went into that and what the purpose of it is. To the end of the day is information to clarify a lot of information that was presented before. It was very informative from staff's perspective. I'd like to build on what Rob said about how it was convened and what was done in there, what the recommendations are from the peer-reviewed panel, and then talk about cost opinions based on council direction asking us to provide more information on costs. Then next steps we'd go from there. What we're asking from you is any input that you have for the council to consider in addition to the report that we're presenting here today. And then we're here to answer questions. Okay, a little background here. The project, and we start with this every time, begins where the community goals began, which is to say in 2013 and 14, a series of community goals were adopted and established, and any project development was based on those to start with. Through a lengthy process, obviously, and this is all background, in the middle of last year, the council directed the team to look at the South Bay Boulevard site to prepare a facility master plan and a master reclamation plan to essentially provide a cookbook for what the project could be when it does go out for bid and then development. And also, most importantly, too, a project to be examined in the environmental impact report to determine what the impacts of that would be. The facility master plan came out draft form. We say draft form because it is a draft plan. It's not the final version of what would happen in November of last year. And the water reclamation plan, the master water reclamation plan, in March of this year. We presented the results of that after that. And part of those plans was, in addition to showing what the facilities would be, is what the cost opinions would be associated with developing that, which would include everything from not only the building of the site, but also pipeline work, earthwork, decommissioning of the existing wastewater treatment plant, a lot of ancillary issues, including things like soft costs, including things like a potential contingency. In April, at the end of April, the council considered that information. We're well aware of a lot of citizen concerns relative to cost. Yes, costs are high as presented. So the council gave us very specific feedback on two fronts. One, we've got to figure out a way to get costs down, and so let's look at alternatives that would do that. What we presented in total was the total Phase 1 and Phase 2, which is to say reclamation ready, then reclamation to come up with a total cost. But to look at, and the council directed us to look at, well, what if we only did secondary treatment, or what if we did tertiary treatment to make reclamation ready? And then to refine those costs based on, if it's appropriate, the peer review panel that was to be convened to really look at all the information we'd presented and go over with an unbiased outside public agency opinion to see whether any of the information we provided was off base in some fashion. So what we did was, and that was a really important part of this, is to convene a group to do that. And we worked with several public agency folks, public works folks from around the county, and these are who we convened. Matt Thompson from City of Paso Robles, he's a wastewater division manager there. John Waddell, who's the project manager for Los Osos, the Los Osos project at the county. Russ Fleming from the City of Pismo Beach, utilities manager, and Dave Hicks, the utility department deputy director for wastewater for City of San Luis. In other words, high-level public works officials from all around the county who have nothing to do with the City of Morro Bay. And what we asked them, we presented to them the facility master plan and master water reclamation plan that we had put together with the consultant teams that are on the city, on the city's team, and to look very closely at the cost assumptions and methodologies used. Were they reasonable? Was the contingency too high? The soft costs, were they in line? We've heard a lot of feedback, gosh, these things are way out of whack. Tell us if you agree with that. And then they provided not only insights about that, but also just general insights from a distance about the project. We didn't ask them to do that specifically, but it was very useful to do that. And in your staff report, it was a lot of those observations were included in there as well. So from that, we got several specific recommendations. Their focus was, how do we reduce costs? That was really their focus. What are ways to reduce costs?
Excuse me, John.
Yes.
One of the questions from the panel when we started the meeting was, are they off limits on discussing anything? And my comment back to them was, it's a no-holds-barred discussion. We need to hear your input on everything regarding this project, and there's nothing off limits in looking at this project. So I just want to make that clear that that was the direction.
And that's
given.
an important consideration. And our job, and what's reflected in the report you have, is a transparent look at very unfiltered observations. We didn't tell them to steer it in any way at all. And what we got was some very interesting feedback. And I put these recommendations up here in their totality. They may be a little hard to read, but they're worth putting up in their totality because this is the distilled feedback we got from them.
Can I ask a question real fast?
Sure.
So their scope was to review the costs.
Yeah.
The data provided them was the facilities master plan and the water reclamation plan. That's what they reviewed at the meeting?
Correct.
So did they review our local coastal plan? Was that provided to them?
They didn't review.
Was it provided to them?
It wasn't provided to them in their review.
Was the Coastal Act and land use policies associated with the Coastal Act provided to them?
No.
Okay. Was the coastal staff report from the hearing where they denied the project provided to them?
No. We did discuss those things in concept. They were aware of those things. What they were...
So it's fair to say they went beyond the scope of the study and rendered opinions without the data that would have been useful in them making an opinion, because in the report you read about them talking about sites and stuff that we've already evaluated, and it appears to me that they made opinions without data that they could. If they would have had that data, they wouldn't even have made that opinion.
That's possible. It's also, we asked them to provide opinions from if you're just looking at it from a technical cost standpoint, we asked them to tell us what are the means of reducing costs. Now, the points you raise are excellent ones.
Well, and that's what I want to clarify, is that they went into this meeting to make cost analysis. They were given cost information, but then made land use comments without land use data.
They made it was right. And
okay.
From the perspective of how that relates to
that
cost.
I understood
That's correct.
the context of the meeting. Okay,
that's right.
Thank you.
That's right. So, and that's a good point, too. We didn't ask them to render opinions about Coastal Act feasibility, Coastal Commission perspectives, just on cost. What did they think? And one of the things they circled in at first, thinking as an engineer would, well, gosh, the way to reduce cost is to go to a site where you don't have as much cost, where pipelines are less, where earthwork is less. So that's where they started. They said, well, the site itself, or any site that's not near the existing wastewater site, is going to be more expensive. So if the only goal is to reduce cost, to focus more on where the existing wastewater treatment plant is, would make sense. Now, I'm going to circle back to that at the end and say, if that's a direction that the council decides they want to go, there's a lot of work that would have to be done, and work with the Coastal Commission specifically to see if that's even a non-starter. But the point was they wanted to give us an opinion about that, and that's what they said. They also recognize that reliance on state water is a big problem. It's the big problem facing the city. And if the goal was to provide reclaimed water, again, doing it as cheaply as possible makes some sense. And again, that was a focus back on the existing site. So they went there first before they started diving into the recommendations having to do with the cost opinions themselves. I think this number 3 also relates to the first two. Due to the state's fiduciary responsibility, the high cost and rate and resultant controversy may impact the ability to receive low-interest state revolving fund financing compared to less controversial projects. What that means in a nutshell is, if there is not community support at a site that can demonstrate to the outside world, to the lending folks, that we've got a project that is stable and reliable, it may become difficult to get funding from those sources because they wouldn't perceive it as a stable project. So that was one thing they wanted us to be aware of as well.
Could I ask you something? In the report, or something's mentioned about the mean income of Morro Bay not being able to support loans for the cost of that project. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
That'll be part of this. They both say number 3 up here, but the second one's number 4. Now they started talking about the South Bay Boulevard site, and they looked at our assumptions on soft costs, hard costs, pipeline costs, contingency, where we're at in the project, and they essentially concluded they were reasonable. There was a reasonable methodology. The assumptions were good. They suggested a few tweaks, and that's in the staff report. It might be a % here or a % there, just on certain assumptions. They thought that the contingency was not only reasonable, some felt it was actually a little low for where we are in the project. Some felt it should be a little higher than that because we just don't know enough to know that at this point. But essentially, that part they were pretty satisfied with in terms of an assumption there. They did suggest a few ways to cut the cost estimates at the South Bay Boulevard site. Now, these didn't amount to a lot of cut, but there were some specific recommendations. One was, depending on the secondary treatment process, the proposed EQ basin could be reduced, and an ox ditch would not require as much equalization. So in other words, this relates to technology issues. Another is because of the relatively isolated location, odor control may not need to be as robust because fewer people around. And again, they're looking at it from a distance. They're not looking at things politically or as a neighbor would, just as you would if you're looking at this.
Can I clarify about the politics of it? Actually, there is some political issues here, because if the project ends up outside the city limits, then the county is involved, okay? And if we keep the property and all the project within the city limits, issues regarding water rights, reclaimed water rights, those become simplified for the city. So I've said this before. What's good for the city isn't necessarily always good for the county, and vice versa. And that's why I think that it is a political issue.
Well,
Just to clarify,
yes.
though, we've talked and up here for years, we've talked about annexation of whatever parcel, so it would be within the city and the county would not be involved. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
it would
thank
be
you.
annexed. So then they also suggested other things, such as if you removed the courtyard from the design and put the project closer to where the courtyard would have been, that might reduce some earthwork costs. They also talked about removing the septage receiving station. That could reducing the size of the fire pump facility. And if the city doesn't intend to go to full tertiary treatment, consider going to an ox ditch with secondary clarifiers as a way of reducing costs. Again, all focused about cost reduction. And finally, reducing masonry and architectural detail, since the site won't be as visible at a distance from there. So these all were important, though collectively not giant changes to the project cost itself. We'll talk about that in a moment. They also suggested that if the city is eventually going to go to full reclamation, don't defer the development of on-site buildings and infrastructure related to recycled water. That is to say, if you're really going to go to recycled water, better to do that sooner than later, because it will become more expensive later on. I know that's an opinion that's not shared by everyone, but it was certainly shared by this group of engineering professionals. So let's hold that thought for a moment. And then finally, they talked about the idea, just in concept, that the proposed combined water and sewer rate of, let's call it $250 a month, seemed untenable for a city such as Morro Bay, given household income sizes and so forth. There was a general recognition that was a high number. And so so they felt it was reasonable to consider ways of reducing costs. So those are their general recommendations. We'll come back to this. I know you have a lot of questions about this. But we want to also talk about the cost opinions themselves. So let's set aside the recommendations. So what we did then was go back and look at the project, and we'll present the unrefined cost opinion of the South Bay Boulevard site here first, but then looked at two alternatives the council asked us to look at in more depth. One was, we'll call them alternative 1 and 2. One was to look at full secondary treatment, This is on the South Bay Boulevard site, and deferring the tertiary treatment and the recycled water. And the second was similar, but to do tertiary disinfection and defer the recycled water. That second one is, in effect, somewhat similar to the project itself, only to defer, don't consider phase 1 and 2 together, but consider them separately. And it also, that second part, the deferring the treatment, we're going to talk about everything in terms of 2017 dollars. So we have to use that information with a grain of salt, because if you defer it to 2025 or 2030, it obviously would change the cost there from that perspective. So first, these first few tables are going to talk about the project that we know about, just as a reminder to folks what went into the cost opinion, the one that is about $167 million. It looked at, in phase 1, the construction of the facility itself and the lift station pipelines of about $87 million. And then the engineering, procurement, soft costs, and so forth, land acquisition, escalation, and so on, $29 million to get you about $117 million. And then we looked at the phase 2 part, which is the recycled water component, the capital costs there, and we have details on all this. We wanted to do this as simply as possible, about $18 million. And then engineering, admin, and construction management adding a 30% assumption, which, again, the peer review panel thought was reasonable, of about $5 million more dollars to get you to about $23 million. So the total cost, when you add those two up, phase 1 and phase 2, gets you to about $140 million. Then you add on contingency of 25%, which, again, they thought was reasonable at this point. That's how we got to $167 million. So that's what we started with. What the council asked us to do is to look at a couple alternatives. The first one, this is the secondary treatment alternative. And we used a lot of the factors, the reduction factors that the peer review panel asked us to consider to reduce certain assumptions on percent markups on certain aspects. And that did some reduction, but again, not a lot, but it did some. And so when you look at this, the secondary treatment version, the construction of the WRF itself would be about $62 million. Add the construction contingency of 25% and the soft costs, you get up to about $98 million. And that's phase 1 secondary treatment at the South Bay Boulevard site. The alternative 2 version, which is to say tertiary treatment, again, no recycled water, but to get you to reclamation ready. The construction of the WRF itself, about $73 million, the contingency of 25%, and then the soft costs gets you up to about $115 million. So 98 versus 115 to essentially get you through to phase 1 at the South Bay Boulevard site using assumptions that the peer review group felt were reasonable and refined the ones that we had that they felt were also, generally speaking, reasonable, including the construction contingency.
John,
Yes.
Is that just the price for the plant itself or also the piping to get it out to the plant?
This is with the piping as well.
Oh, okay.
It's all of that. It's all of that. So then this is a table that does some quick comparisons just so you get a sense of this, how it compares to the project as presented previously through the facility master plan and such. The construction cost savings for the two alternatives vary, looking at each line item as you go down, between $5 and $18 million. That is to say, secondary treatment, you save more relative than tertiary treatment on that piece. And then the next item is the soft cost and contingency. So the capital cost savings for the two alternatives relative to essentially that phase 1 piece, about $27 million on secondary, about $9 million on the tertiary version. Now, the second piece of this table is deferred costs, and that meaning if you're going to go to phase 2, the full recycled, how much more are you going to have to spend to get there with these alternatives? And these are based, again, it's a little tough to do properly because we're talking about 2017 dollars, but essentially it's somewhere between 40 and 45 million more dollars, depending on the alternative, to add on to that cost to get you all the way to full recycling. We'll come back to show you a summary slide or two about that. But before we get there, I also wanted to point out, since they did talk about, the panel did talk about the existing wastewater site as something to consider, we knew there'd be questions about that. And they said, you're going to save a lot of costs. What we did was work with Black and Veatch at a very rough, extremely rough scale to try to apply the factors at South Bay Boulevard to a site. We don't want to be specific, but let's call it the existing wastewater site or somewhere very near it, to see what the possible savings would be if you did it there. The same kind of project, the full Phase 1, Phase 2 project. And the rough savings, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $40 million, plus or minus some, which would to say a full project would be somewhere between 124 and 129 million, and that could be off, could be high, could be low, but that's the magnitude issue right there. And what's that savings due to? Well, the reduced site work for one thing, the reduced yard piping on the site because of a smaller site, reduced wall thicknesses. If the site's more level, you don't need the retaining wall kind of design, reduced access road lengths, off-site pipeline lengths, and so forth. There would be no septage receiving station or fire protection facility. And, of course, and the remote operations facility wouldn't be there either. But, again, I just wanted to throw this out with a caveat. Very rough, because if the council at the end of the day asked us to go back and look at this, and if the Coastal Commission was willing to consider that, and if it made sense in the local coastal plan, and if it were to be carried forward, we could explore the idea of refining those costs. There'd be a lot of steps in that. But we wanted to present this to give an order of magnitude so folks understand what we're talking about, generally speaking. We're not talking about reducing it to $30 or $40 million. It's still not a cheap project, but it is cheaper. We're fairly confident about that.
And what would that, excuse me, Richard, what would that result in a monthly savings? Do you have that number?
On rates? We'll talk about that in a moment right here. About to get to that.
Regarding, so I'm clear, what you're talking about is you had your peer review. They said, okay, let's take a look at the existing site, right? Going just to secondary, correct? Now,
Well,
No, going full project.
full project.
full project, but you're going to just treat the effluent to secondary, correct?
No,
Or is it going to go tertiary?
They asked us, the council has asked us to look at a cost opinion using refined cost assumptions that the peer review panel looked at our assumptions, and we used the refined versions of what we had done, which changed things a little bit, but not much, in terms of percentage, in terms of engineering, procurement, and so forth. We applied that to the South Bay Boulevard site using the council-directed alternatives. Council said, look at cheaper versions of the project on the South Bay site using those assumptions. One would be a secondary, one would be a tertiary. Alternative 1 and 2.
Okay.
Right.
Now, these things have been looked at back in 2007 and 2009, and those project costs were started off at $26.1 million. Then it went to $36 million for secondary and $38 million for tertiary at the existing or near the existing site. So what you're saying is back then we had a plant in the neighborhood of $38 million going through tertiary, and now we're looking at $128 million for the same thing? I mean, as far as the outcome, as far as the outflow of the water?
You're talking about now the existing wastewater site, right?
Or
Just want to be
near
clear.
to it.
Or near to it, right.
They did those studies.
That's what we're saying generally, and we're saying that based on a lot more refined understanding of what the detail that went into the facility master plan and all the line items that went there. Applying those to the existing site gets us closer to that 124 to 129 number.
Yeah, but we had a draft facilities master plan back then with regards to that. And the other issue that I'm questioning as far as the process is, to be clear, the Coastal Commission doesn't have the authority to have forces to move off that site. Unless we do development, they have authority for development, but not forcing us to move it.
I'm going to let John tackle the coastal question, but I did want to respond to your question about the old project, the 2008 to 2012 iteration. And What this includes that didn't include is this is a project designed for indirect potable reuse. It includes injection wells. It includes reverse osmosis at the plant, ultraviolet disinfection, and MBR facility. Whereas originally that the old project included, it was an oxidation ditch with clarifiers and with disc filters, and you're only filtering roughly 2/3 of the water.
It was about a 400,000 gallon per day potential reclaimed water component with cloth disc filters and a reconfiguration of the chlorine contact chamber to provide that redundant disinfection.
Yeah, but we also had Cayucas on board at that time too. So right now with the reduction of their flows, which is about 25%, correct?
Approximately, yeah.
Yeah, so that right there should have an effect on the cost as well.
But we're treating it to a much higher level than that originally anticipated.
I'm trying to understand what the project is. I thought alternative one was just secondary treatment. Now, are we talking about full tertiary reclaimed water treatment and injection wells?
So alternative 1 and 2 as presented in this report are for the South Bay Boulevard site. The alternative that was looked at for the existing or proximity to the existing treatment plant site was the full project cost, so full reclaimed water. We didn't run alternative 1 and 2 on the existing site because we wanted to limit our work on that existing site because we do not have direction from council to go into depth in exploring that existing site.
Okay, so to be clear, the project, when you're looking at the existing site, that cost of $128 million is a full reclamation facility with MBR, RO, and everything else.
Yes,
okay.
For groundwater recharge.
And that is a direct comparison to the $168 million that you're saying the South Bay Boulevard site that would be able to accomplish the same thing.
Correct.
Does that take into account the maintenance and operation costs that would be associated with pumping all that sewage up there and then bringing it back down?
I don't think it includes any O&M costs at all.
Okay.
As you know, those would be expected. Those pumping costs would be lower, but they're not quantified here.
Right. But I think
those pumping costs would be lower at the existing plant site.
Well, we don't need a lift station at the existing
But we don't.
site.
Well, you'd have to have some sort of an influent lift station to pick up the sewage coming in because it comes in.
Yeah, but that's a lot different than.
But it'd be. You're right. It would be a smaller, smaller lift station.
Well,
it would be smaller pumps.
But I think
call that a lift station.
All you can take away from this really is at an order of magnitude. We'll call it somewhere in the neighborhood. You do the math between 125 and 166. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 million, 25% less. It's less, significantly less, but it's not 1/3 of the price. It's not that order of magnitude. And that's if you make the assumptions that we made for the full project at South Bay Boulevard as applied to the existing treatment plant site. Now, you asked the other question about the Coastal Commission. You know, where we're starting with this process, again, starts back in 2013, where the Coastal Commission, with the support of the council, said, we need to get away from the site, from the existing site. So you might ask the question, has anything changed since that time relative to Coastal Commission's demeanor? Or would it be expected they'd turn around and say, well, now this site is okay? We have no idea what the answer to that question is. What we do know is a few things. In those 4 years, the city, the citizens, you, council, program management team, consultants have explored lots and lots of sites at various levels of detail, gone into some depth on many of them, run into one issue or another, either environmental or neighborhood proximity or cost, which is a current common issue, one place or another. It's been difficult to achieve consensus one place or another. So the argument, if there is one, with Coastal is, would it make sense to be at that site and with the idea that there is a potentially achievable project there, but it would run counter to some of your goals relative to sea level rise, relative to coastal uses, and so forth. Is that an idea that you'd be supportive of or not? Now, we don't know the answer to that. All we know is what the LCP says right now. All we know is what the Coastal Commission direction was in 2013. This is presented as a result of what the peer review team suggested as one way of reducing costs. So we have to keep it in that context right now. And beyond that, we can't really say much more than that. The rest is speculative at this point.
Well, one of the things with regards to sea level rise, recently we had a study, I think, by Michael Baker International, and according to the study that they did, that won't be the sea level rise wouldn't be an issue for a little 50 to 60 years, I think, is their estimate. So that's the life of the project. And plus, when you talk about nearby sites, you're not necessarily talking about the existing wastewater treatment plant, right? You're talking about maybe the Hansen site, or
we're trying to keep it a little general, but with some flexibility in that general vicinity, because we really don't know. We'd have to really nail that down, and there's an implication there on schedule as well. We'd have to nail things down and really work with that if that's a direction the council goes. Again, we know that this is a delicate issue, but we also know it's something that was brought up, and we wanted to daylight that issue. So all that. We understand all those issues and the implications of that. But we do want to present it in the context of, let's look at this summary table. This is interesting. The first column on the left is the existing project as presented in the facility master plan of the $167 million, which is the totality of Phase 1 and Phase 2 together. Now, when we look at the second column, that's the alternative one. That's the secondary treatment alternative that the council asked us to look at, which is to say Phase 1. What does it cost to get us to Phase 1 there? And that's about $98 million, as we discussed. With Phase 2, which we considered, what would you need to do to turn that into recycled water? A little over $40 more million. Alternative 2 was essentially the tertiary treatment project similar to the existing project, the full project of $166 million, but just stop at Phase 1. There's some differences because there's certain things you would do in the full project in Phase 1 that relate to recycled water that you wouldn't necessarily do in this alternative, but roughly speaking, they're in the ballpark. And to get there is about $115 million. And remember, these can also include the contingency of 25%, which was found as a reasonable place to be at this point in the process. Phase 2 in that, to get it all the way to recycled, is about another $40 million. So when you look at those first three columns, you come to the conclusion that the full project with the refined costs, the cost estimates, to get all the way to recycled water at some point does go down relative to 167, but only goes down so much to the 140 odd to 150 odd million dollar range. When you compare that full project to something similar at or near the existing wastewater site, if it's even possible, that would reduce the costs in the neighborhood of about another 25 to $30 million from those numbers at the end of the day. And that's as far as we could take that. But one thing we did do, and it's in the staff report, and you asked the question about rates. Now, what would this do to rates? And again, we want to present this with a very big caveat. This is not based on a rate study. This is not based, we'd have to really update and revise the city's draft financial and rate analysis for the project to really get what this might do to the rates. And also keep in mind that these rates that are presented really are based on an outside envelope and does not necessarily account for any kind of offset money from grants, loans, and so forth that might help reduce those rates. It also accounts for, right now, all contingencies and everything else in the project needing to be used. So we're hoping this provides, and people understand it as an outside rough guess estimate on rates. But if you look at it that way, and that's true of the rates that have been presented so far, for the current project. And let's look at this in the first column. These are, again, reminders for what we presented for the full project at South Bay Boulevard. It ends up being a $91 increase over approved rates getting you to about a $241 total, rough guess at this point for full project. When you look at the two alternatives the council asked us to look at, the phase one, that's the secondary only, looks at about another $35 to $40 increase over approved rates to put you up into the $185 to $190 total. That's to get you to essentially reclamation ready. If you did go to full reclamation, that's the phase two, you'd be adding another $40 to $45 on top of that. And that compares to the alternative two, that's the tertiary treatment alternative. You get it to recycled ready at the end of phase one. It's about roughly, let's call it a $50 rate increase on top of the approved rates to put you right at about $200 for a total. And then you can see how if you added the phase two to that, it's another increase of $35 to $40. So to get the actual recycled water incrementally adds to that. Again, also want to caveat that all these numbers are very, very rough at this point, but do provide an order of magnitude understanding of what this all means.
John?
Yes.
Can I ask a quick question? On the last line there, it says at or near the existing wastewater. When you say near, does that mean contiguous properties, or are you talking, quarter of a mile? Did they quantify that?
At a site that wouldn't require an auxiliary pump station and pipelines.
That would not require that.
Essentially, in that neighborhood over there to the west of...
Pretty contiguous.
Yeah, right in that same general ballpark, pretty much. And in that case, we applied the numbers, the rough numbers we came up for that site for the full project, and we were looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of a $50 to $60 a month rate increase if you applied that to at or near the existing site in those assumptions.
Richard brings up the Hansen site, and while we're talking about at or near, and since that is a near location, I was wondering, can you address what are some of the qualities of the Hansen site that would make this a good location?
Yeah, what some of the qualities of the Hansen site, it's about 4 feet higher than the existing wastewater treatment plant. The collection systems that enter the current wastewater treatment plant, in my opinion, would just have to be extended and modified to address those. And it would be an opportune time to address, and one of the, which is in a letter from the Coastal Commission back in 2010, I think, from Mike Watson, addressing the collection system that is leaching into our drinking water aquifer. So it'd be an opportune time to address all those and make that part of the project.
Thank you. I think that was an important point to make.
So the question I asked earlier, I still didn't get answered, and I'm thinking it's, by looking at this, if we were to consider moving to the existing site, considering the existing site, there'd be about roughly a $30 a month savings in rates.
That's essentially correct.
Okay.
In the long haul for full recycle.
Thank you. And that number, there's a lot of discussion on MHI. I want to get to it later, but even that number, when I did the math on $210 a month, that's still above, that's 5% of MHI, which is above the EPA's nationwide recommendation. So even the argument of the South Bay site being above MHI, recommended MHI rates nationwide, that still exists with this site.
That would be correct too.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So these are the essential, this is the data we came up with based on what we worked with the peer review panel and worked very closely. Again, the purpose now is to provide sort of a window into understanding generally what this means, orders of magnitude, and to allow the council to understand how to move forward. So the next steps, what happens with this? Well, today, you're here to review what we were talking about now and provide any more input for the council's consideration as they decide what to do in moving forward. The council has some options to do this, and this is not the only options, but among them, they could decide let's move forward at South Bay Boulevard based on revised cost estimating approaches in this report. They could refine. They could go forward with just a phase one only concept as described here. They could refine the city's goals and direct staff to modify the project in some way accordingly at the South Bay Boulevard site. They could direct staff and the team to provide a refined cost estimate for building this at or near the existing wastewater site, keeping in mind a few things here. Depending on the outcome of that, the council may want to direct staff to take steps to clarify an appropriate site, which is to say at or near. What does that mean exactly? We don't know exactly that yet. Refine the draft facility master plan and master water reclamation plan to focus on that new location. So the technology part and all that probably wouldn't change much, but how the siting and the layout and pipelines and so forth, that would change, with costing obviously. The EIR, which we have the EIR consultant on hold pending knowing what to do, have them focus on examining the impacts at that site. And all of that, and most importantly, would include working with the regional board and coastal commission to determine whether a project at such a location would even be supportable. So that all is in play if the council directs there. So there's some work to be done. It's not a simple plug and play and off we go. There's some work to be done if it went that direction. And so with that, that concludes our presentation, and we're here for questions and try to provide some answers.
Okay, before I go to public comment, any other questions for staff on the presentation or about the cost study? Dale? No?
I had several questions, but the first question I have right now is you got some costs for the wastewater treatment plants that are being managed by these experts, but I didn't see one for Pismo. Do you happen to know how much that cost to build?
I don't know what their plant cost to build. I think it was finished sometime around 2007, 2008. It's a secondary treatment plant that discharges to the ocean. They're currently in the process of developing a regional groundwater augmentation project where they would take the effluent from their plant, possibly the effluent from the South San Luis Obispo County Sanitation District plant, combine them, and then treat them to levels so that they could inject that water into their groundwater basin. So the costs that are in here really are from the discussions that came up in the workshop. And they said, we're doing this project, we're doing this project, we're doing this project. And they're all different in terms of the scope and size and what they were doing for their various projects.
And one thing also to note in that section of the report where it says other observations, we thought it would be useful to provide some context for you and the public to understand how the flavor of the discussion went. It was pretty freewheeling, free-ranging, but some of those were pretty interesting comments, including comments about unique Morro Bay demographics, for example. I thought that was an interesting perspective because it does provide some insight as to the challenges that the community faces that may be unique to Morro Bay and not every community in terms of its size being a little more than 10,000 people, its demographics with retirees and folks who don't have the ability to pay for certain things. So again, they had some interesting insights.
I guess where I was coming from, I thought it's the first time I've actually seen the numbers together, and the report had mentioned, for those people that haven't read the report, that SLO's project was $140 million. And I don't know what the size of SLO is, but Paso's plant cost $47 million. The Los Osos oxidation ditch plant was $48 million. And that's why I was just curious about Pismo's, because all of them seem to be, significantly different than the costs that we're talking about for our plant.
Well, they're all significantly different projects.
I understand that, but we're also a much smaller community than these other communities, right? We're also a much smaller community than these other communities, right?
Yeah, we definitely are, but the contractors don't give a discount based on population. Cement, pipelines are pipelines, so the cost of a project that you don't
and one thing
you can't, that's not an apple to apples comparison of saying a community, just because a community is bigger, that their project was less. They didn't do the same project as us.
I was thinking of the scale, the size of the project, given that the community is so much smaller. I'm just pointing out that I thought it was an interesting observation to see how much cheaper they were.
One difference is we're talking about a brand new facility from scratch, new pipelines, everything brand new. In each one of these cases, Paso Robles was a renovation of an existing plant. Some parts of that plant they didn't touch, like their anaerobic digesters in certain parts of that facility. So that was not a complete demo and complete new plant. City of San Luis Obispo, they're planning an upgrade. So there's work they've done over the last 20 years or so that really anticipated. They already did some of the work they need to do to get their plant ready for the future. So that $140 million for their project, that's to upgrade that plant. It's not to totally replace it.
Yeah, but we, for the last few years, had a maintenance management plan. We put in millions of dollars into our current plant, and then the other issue is that like Los Osos had a brand new plant, okay, and that's 40, and what I'm looking at is 120 some odd million and 28 million, and you're looking at. Previously, we were talking about the whole project was in the 36 to 38 million range, and it's already been that work has already been done.
But again, that's not an apples-to-apples comparison.
Sure, it is. It's the same plant, John.
And the 127 million includes much more than just building a new plant.
Well,
we have to recognize that. So saying that the Los Osos plant costs one price and then ours is 3 times more. We're getting 3 times more stuff as well.
No, we're not.
Yes, we
No, we're not. We have a lot of it already done.
Staff, is that a correct assumption?
So one difference between the Los Osos project. One thing I would like to note is I think that the value of having the public works officials that we had there, they really have no bias or no reason to give us an answer one way or the other. They were the folks who implemented or managed the projects that you're talking about. And they looked at the numbers we had here and said, yeah, those numbers look about right for your project. So that's one thing I would note right there. And they all recognize their projects are different. Like, for instance, Los Osos. A few differences with Los Osos is their treatment plant is oxidation ditch plant with tertiary with disc filters. And we're talking about a plant with reverse osmosis and membrane filtration and UV disinfection and injection wells. I mean, we've got all that added in for the $129 million. So our project's different from their project.
Well, one of the guys at the peer review that was there, Matt Thompson, he used to work for the regional board when I worked in Cayucas, so he's kind of aware of what we're up against, and he's aware of the flows issues and the tourist issues and all the surcharging issues that we have. So he's not completely unaware of some of the idiosyncrasies here. However, it's still like when you look at just looking at the project itself, what we have right now and what would be minimally required and what we could afford as a city.
Jenny, do you still have some more questions?
I do.
Jenny had a list going.
The most surprising thing for me was the suggestion to build the wastewater treatment plant at the current site, because we've been talking about this for 3 years now, that the Coastal Commission and the Regional Board were not behind that. And so, yes, I think it's at a lower cost if, in fact, we could build there. But I was surprised that they even considered that, because I thought that was totally off the table. So my question is, has the city talked with these two groups? I know you said you've been meeting frequently, but have you actually asked them what they thought about us going back to the original plant? And if so, what's their reaction? Is this even feasible, or why are we talking about it?
The answer is no. We have not been directed by council to investigate going back to the existing site. The reason that the peer review committee looked at it is because we told them not to hold back, to give us everything that they had. So, and we told council we were going to bring forward everything that came out of the peer review workshop.
And just so I understand this again, their mission was to look at costs or our cost assumptions to date, but you asked them, put everything on the table, and without looking at our LCP, without looking at the Coastal Act, without looking at the last meeting of the Coastal Commission when they unanimously denied this based on LCP and Coastal Act issues, they just simply said, hey, you want to save money, consider the existing site.
And they readily admitted that it would not be an easy lift to do that. If it's possible, these will save you the most significant costs.
Right. Okay.
Okay, then I was very glad to learn that the experts thought the overall cost estimate is reasonable, because that's why we recommended just another pair of eyes. Not that we, thought that you were going to try to pull a fast one on us, but it's always good to have people in the field take a look at that. But I was even happier to learn how costs could be cut, like the construction management from 8 to 6%, design for 6 to 8% of the construction cost and not 10%. But I was surprised that the experts thought that the soft cost and the decommissioning costs and the planning contingency percentage of 25% was appropriate, because I know we've talked about that 25% number in the past. And again, I still think that seems really high, but then I'm not an expert in this.
Well, they said it was appropriate for this level of where we are in the project. They said it was appropriate for where we are at this level in the project. It may change, but for this level, how far we've taken it, they felt that it was an appropriate cost. That could have changed down the line.
Oh, okay. Is that what they told you,
That was one of the caveats they made.
That's correct. That's
And
what they said.
With this administration cost, if I'm correct, on one of your flyers, you had $5 million for admin cost. Is that right?
I believe that was for engineering, admin, and construction management.
$5 million, and they thought that was reasonable.
Yes. At this level of the project, the actual cost, remember, will be based on competitive proposals. These are estimates to establish a maximum rate.
Okay, any other questions, Jenny? Okay, did you have one more?
Well, before we stray too far away from Mike Nunley's report, page 2-4, before we stray too far from Mike Nunley's report, page 2-4, item 14, where they compare costs with the city of St. Louis at $140 million, and then the upgrades that were conducted at Paso. And then the Los Osos cost, the cost for what they built in Los Osos in its entirety was not just $48 million. It was more to the tune of $187 million, if I'm correct. So I just wanted to make sure that people are not thinking that how can Los Osos, because they're doing all these things by building all these laterals and building all these lift stations and whatever, how can it really only cost $48 million for, so it just by kind of lumping these things, and in this case, I think potentially mixing apples with oranges, it maybe is kind of a false narrative.
And to confirm that concept, that is a good point. You have to understand that in the workshop we had with them, which, by the way, lasted all day long, it became a pretty free exchange. And so we jot down notes when numbers were brought up. And in certain cases, there was no exploration to try to compare apples to apples exactly. But if there was a number brought up, we wrote it down. But that's a good example of one that may not be apples to apples.
I just bring it up because I think it was confusing to Jenny. And also, too, I think this Los Osos, they actually did, correct me if I'm wrong, Didn't they get a $22 million grant to help defray some of their costs?
In total, that was about the total cost, but it was more than one grant. It was multiple.
Yeah. So they did qualify for grants.
Right, I think the 48 million was simply for the oxidation ditch, right?
Yeah.
Right, but what she's saying is we can't use that number and say, why is ours so much more expensive? Because we're doing lift stations, we're doing recycled water, we're doing
We're not doing lift stations.
pipes.
We won't do lift stations if we're looking at this project on the
South Bay
existing
Boulevard
site.
has lift stations, is that correct?
Yeah,
Thank you.
South Bay
Okay.
Boulevard had a lift station, and you talk about LCP and all that. Those issues still existed with that because you got a critical infrastructure right there in the same area.
And just to clarify, we're still operating under the assumption that South Bay Boulevard is the site at which a project would go forward until the council provides other direction, and we would have to explore through coastal. So I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit to assume otherwise, but just to clarify on that point.
Okay. And I have one final question. Sir, please let us, you can talk at public comment, while public comment in a minute. So I have one question about bullet number 7 on page 6 of 29 of the packet. The committee made a statement that the cost of the project would be about 6% of annual income, which is double the EPA's affordability index, but there's no reference to the affordability index, and you said earlier they didn't have that information with them. The affordability index combined water sewer is 4.5%, so I don't see how that's double. That seems like an inaccurate statement to me.
Okay, we'll take that down and look at that.
Okay. All right. If there's no,
Just some general comments to make. Do I do it now or not do it?
we'll do it after. We're going to talk again after public comment. Okay. With that, I will open the floor to public comment. This is for items on this specifically. Come forward. You have 3 minutes. State your name and go.
Hi, my name is Diane Plana from North Morrow Bay, and I just want to make sure that everybody that's watching or that's here is aware that in 2013, you can go to the Coastal Commission website, watch the video. We requested for them to deny it. We did not get denied from the Coastal Commission. We requested to deny it. Mary Schallenberger was very clear that she was not happy with us because they went to a lot of work to approve it, and that we were basically asking them to deny it to save us from ourselves. So that's the first thing, is that we requested it to be denied. We were not just automatically denied. The second thing is that the public should be informed that in this cost, all this infrastructure that's cracked, growing, leaking throughout our town is included in this price. As far as I'm hearing from all the meetings I've been watching and hearing, is that all the infrastructure that is seeping sewer into our groundwater is to be repaired, included in this price, if I'm correct. Number 3 was that we do have local engineers that live in Morro Bay that can do this project, and a lot of people are misled that we have to go to these outside companies, and that's false. That's just for the record. That's incorrect. And also, page 13 of 29 of the agenda packet, I totally support that we build the new compact plant at or near our current water treatment plant location, and only do the sewer and not, I'm happy with the state water. I see no reason why we have to do that if nobody can afford it. And my other question is the $200 increase for a single person in the home? Or is that a family of 4? Or is that a family of 5? Is that just a base rate? Or is that no matter how many people live in the home? Thank you very much.
Anybody else?
Jim Pauley, Morro Bay. The first thing I'd like to suggest is you get near your microphones or turn them up. Seems every time I go to these meetings, we can hear these people here. We can't hear anybody else. At least I can't, and I get it. Can you hear? Can't hear. It's ridiculous. Either fire the technician or get closer to the microphone. Something's wrong. Okay, the other thing is, you mentioned 4.5%. That's the affordability index or the income index of people in the area?
That's the state's, the nationwide recommended sewer and water combined percentage of gross income.
Okay, charge to the fees. Okay. Why don't you cap this thing? Nobody's capping how much the city is willing to spend. And so they're building these Taj Mahals and variations, and we're placing it around the city everywhere. And we always get to the higher cost. Work the other way. Why can't you just figure out what you think the citizens can afford, then simply put down what you want and go out to bid? Let somebody else tell you how they can build it. And that's a suggestion I have.
I'm Jeff Heller. Thank you all for spending so much time on this issue that's become a real problem for a lot of people, obviously because of the cost. I had a great cost savings idea as I was sitting back here and listening to all this. It seems like we've come full circle in the last 10 years. We're kind of back where we started years ago, reports ago, millions of dollars ago. My suggestion is that the city stop the project. Now, before I hear all the reasons why we can't stop it, somebody has to tell me what happened to the money that we approved 2 years ago, which included $6.5 million for high-priority water system upgrades. Has any of that work been done? If so, what did it cost? What was done? $7.5 million for high-priority sewer system upgrades. Has any of that money been spent? If so, what was it spent on? How much is left, if anything? And part of that increase, that 218 vote 2 years ago, was a $75 million plant on the Rancho Colina site. Build it. Why do we have to spend all our time coming to these meetings, learning about sewer plants, trying to sort through very technical stuff, most of which we don't understand, and to be assaulted by the city council over and over again, threatened for future 218 votes if we don't approve the one that's coming up? My question to you, as you represent the citizens of this community, is deliver the message to the council to prove to us that anything that we paid for 2 years ago has actually happened. I requested a record of the cost for this project from the city a week or so ago for the last 4 years. You know what I got back? A list of transactions. A check here to so-and-so for this amount. A check here for so-and-so for that amount. I don't believe this city has any idea what they've spent in the last 10 years or 4 years or 3 years on this project. The project needs to be stopped. We don't want to hear about future threats of increases until you can tell us what you've done with our money already. Please don't tell me, please advise the council to not tell us the train has left the station and that we have no voice. Where would we be if you didn't have that peer review, one-day peer review, if we hadn't pressed for it? The consultants that you're paying millions of dollars for, your public works director who's supposedly protecting our interests, did they mention that idea? Did they ever raise the question of affordability? Did they ever tell you or the council this is going to be a $170 million project and we're just going to continue to do 218 votes until it passes? You're paying them millions of dollars. A good consultant gives the council and you guys good advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop the project.
Good afternoon. It's me again. Carol Truesdale, North Morro Bay. Been here since 1995. We're hearing all these numbers, but what about the cost for funding? Where is the money coming from? Someone said for every $10 million, it's $691,000 we borrow. Where are our grants? Where are we financially? Scares the bejesus out of me because 7.2, according to Mr. Levick's, 7.2 billion, a million is in the reserves right now. So where's the money? Where is it going to come from? How much is it going to cost us over and above the build out? Thank you.
My name is Homer Alexander. I'm a Morro Bay ratepayer. On page 4 of your staff report, there's a table with 4 options. I suggest you consider recommending to the City Council a 5th option. The 5th option would be a basic MBR plant at or near the existing Tasca Road site that produces tertiary treated water without any of the reclamation components. Based on the numbers in your staff report, and also up on the screen, moving the plant and then going back to the original concept of 2 phases would bring the capital cost down to $86 million for phase 1. I subtracted the $40.7 million from the midpoint of the 124 to 129 number to come up with 86. The detailed cost structure in the Black and Veatch Facility Master Plan could also be reviewed again for the sole purpose of finding additional $5 to $10 million in savings. As an example, is it necessary to have a 7,000 square foot administrative building that is projected to cost more than our firehouse did? In 4 years, when the plan is completed, the city would then explore the various options to recycle treated wastewater. I don't think there's enough known today about the future of both the costs and sustainability of our major water source, state water, to include a reclamation phase now. Our 4 neighbors on the north coast only have 1 source of drinking water. Morro Bay has 3. Do we really know enough today to commit spending millions of dollars so we can have a 4th? As I'm sure you're all aware, the monthly increases for the residential customers that are shown on page 4 of the staff report are above the already approved rates. These new rates will not be fully implemented until July of 2019. Remember, the community has only seen the impact of 2 of the 5 annual increases that were approved 2 years ago. If the additional rate increases that are shown in the staff report are implemented, they will come close to doubling the bill that the ratepayers are going to be receiving in the next couple of days. I could be mistaken, but if the combined bill for water and sewer services ends up being anywhere near $200 a month, the city's 218 vote will not be successful. If it fails, what then? It is for that reason you should consider recommending to the City Council that the project team provide a 5th alternative, which would be to move the plant and break the project up into 2 phases. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hello, my name is Edward Sylvester, and I'd like to apologize for the outbreak that I made here a little while ago. But it was really upsetting because Mrs. Jenny Clark, like the man was saying before that they couldn't hear, I had to have, normally I listen to my TV at 14, and I had to have it all the way to 84 to listen. And Mrs. Jennings there, what made me mad to come down, you asked a question, and these people over here snowballed you. Our original plant was to cost $36 million. to replace where we had it down here. We don't have to put a new collection system in. We don't have to put a new outfall line in. I mean, it's how they snowballed you into telling you we have to put in a new plant is totally a lie. I mean, you can't get no more bald-faced than that. And I hope I'm not degrading myself by telling you this, but I hate to see people lie to another people so they can line their own pockets, because that's what's actually happening. Where is our money for our state reclamation, our water reclamation that is due in 6 years? Do we know where the money's at for that? And the city right now is operating out of the emergency fund? Good gracious. What is our mayor thinking about? He's wanting to sink us. And that he will. And I don't know if you people tallied any of this out or not. Do you realize how much money you have to have in savings at 3.5% to pay for your water bill and sewer bill for 1 year at today's rate? You have to have $50,000 just to pay for the sewer and the water bill at 3.5% for 1 year. Has anybody calculated that out for all the retired people that are here? Okay, that's about it for me before I lose it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Meredith Bates, and I wanted to tell you how much I appreciate all the hard work you've been doing for many years. I support many of the things that Jeff Heller talked about. We're kind of going around in circles. I really don't like being told that the train has left the station and we have to keep going down some path that many citizens are really, really concerned about. I don't need to talk about all the details and the specifics because we have a lot of experts right here in the room in Morro Bay that are talking about it. You guys are doing a really good job of asking important questions. Thank you. I want to help you, though, to avoid some of the controversy that is going to only get worse in this city unless there's a little bit more civility and opportunity for people to ask questions and get answers. I was really disappointed that what someone on this panel was put down because they wanted to give citizens an opportunity to speak at the beginning of the meeting. This meeting is at 3 p.m. Many people are at work. People might want to come by and say their piece and go back to work. So I really encourage you to allow public comment when people can make it. I think that's very important. The second thing I want to talk about is just words that are confusing. I think for me, I get distrustful of what's going on when the wording changes, and I think I understand one thing, and then the words are changed. Example is the peer review committee. And although it seemed very secret to me because nobody could tell me where it was meeting, when it was meeting, who it was on it until afterwards, I know it's also called the panel of experts. I saw that in some notes. And then I saw up on the board it's called the Public Works Panel. And then I also saw a report calling it the Expert Panel of Local Public Works Officials. So is that all the same thing? The last thing I want to really talk about is the forums that we didn't talk about at all today, but I sure hope they are really coming up because people need answers. People need an opportunity for dialogue. And if that doesn't happen, the controversy and the anger is only going to get worse. I hope that you recommend to the City Council that they structure these forums in a way that people can actually have a dialogue back and forth so that there will be some more trust and more, I can't think of the word right now, but more that we'll get along and work together on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Nancy Bast, a longtime ratepayer. I think my bill was about $18 when I moved here for water and sewer. The presentation makes me want to ask more questions than anything. And one of them, I've always wondered about annexation. We have an initiative that says any annexation has to be voted by the people. And I've never heard it talked about how we will annex any of this property. I personally think it should be within the city to keep things uncomplicated. Mr. Rickenbach said it was the peer review committee was an important part of the process, and yet why did it not come up before this? Have we actually boiled it down to an MBR technology? I want to hear that said. And once we know that, why can't we put out bids? And I passed around a bunch of flyers in the last week to a lot of people that either weren't there because they were working, or a lot of older people that really had never heard about this. And one of the things that I told them is that there's going to be this meeting the day after a major holiday, and they said, well, they were going away. And all during this summertime, people will be going away. And so we should not make any kind of a decision until we get our people back and that they know exactly what is being talked about and what it will mean to their budget. And one other last thing is that I don't really like having an adversarial approach from anybody that's in a leadership position, whether you're volunteers or whether you are paid a stipend for your work. I would prefer that you remain neutral and hear what your neighbors have to say. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Barry Brandon, citizen of Morro Bay. Mr. Diodati, thank you for your attention. The challenge that you have as citizens to represent us is very difficult. And I know that how deeply you feel about what you're doing, or you wouldn't be here. And I really want to thank you. And I really want to thank the City Council, because the train had left the station until we had some council people ask for a pause. And then we went on and got a peer review. And in this city, to me, that was a major accomplishment. And I think we're a long ways getting the train possibly stopped, getting a plant that we can afford. The Coastal Commission said that they would like to have the project either at Rigetti or at Rancho Colima, but there were other sites that were identified in the Surf Rider report, and one of them was out on Little Morrow Creek Road. Little Morrow Creek Road is in the city. It was identified, and a small, compact plant, as identified in this report, when they said they could have a very small, like 1 acre site, would fit on it very well. It's in the city. You don't have to annex it. It's about less than 1/3 of the distance to South Bay Boulevard. You don't have to pump the sewer up and pump the treated effluent back because it's gravity. You can recharge the aquifer that's there. But no one's talking about that. It hasn't been looked at. So we don't have to fight the Coastal Commission. We can use what they recommended. We could be a little smarter with this. But I really want to thank the City Council, and I want to thank you for listening. I think we're going to find a solution. Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name's John Mino, Morro Bay, and I was just wondering, it would seem like it would be helpful if the ratepayers also had an analysis on the cost of one of the Highway 41 sites that's already, I know they weren't taken off the table from an EIR standpoint, but from a cost standpoint as well, in case if the direction from the Coastal Commission is alternate to the plant site, if that's preferable. Thank you.
My name is Anne-Marie Schnetzler. I live in Morro Bay. I have a couple of questions for... you cannot hear? Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. I have a couple of questions. I really don't know, after following a number of meetings at the City Council and on television and on coming in person, there are things that are not clear about this project to me, and I'm sure it's true for other people. What do we really have to do? What is mandatory for us to achieve, and what is optional? What is luxury item in that project, and what is really needed, and we have no choice, but we have to do A, B, C, D, and so forth. And what is other things that are very nice, like a $10 million administrative building? It is absolutely evident to me. I've been living here for 18 years. I've talked to a lot of people. I volunteer in this city. That the cost we're going to have to incur to make this project, as it is presented, or even partially revised, is not going to be affordable. Are we going to be able to borrow money to pay for this when there will be in this city people like me who respect every one of you? I work as a public servant, so I know what I'm talking about. I know you are here to do the best you can do, but you have to listen to us. This is a democracy. We have to be listened to. We cannot afford such a project. I would like somebody to have the backbone to go to the city and say, we need a project that requires this to be achieved. We can afford only so much. Let's say $60 million or less. Can we have this project with all those requirements done by anybody for $60 million or less? I used to work and have a lot of employees. I had 1,800 employees where I worked. I didn't tell to the staff, we need to have something done about this. What do you think about it? Give me your ideas. We had to give a certain perimeter where they could come up with a project, and I feel this has not been done. And I'm counting on you to talk to the City Council and stress that. We know we need something done. We want something that we can afford. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Steve Stevens. I think it's unconscionable, given the magnitude of this project, that we are at the stage that we're at. I think one of the biggest problems that face the city is that there has not been an active outreach program so that people are aware of what is going on. It is imperative that the city take a position of doing an outreach so people have an opportunity to convey what they are able to afford. I like the concept of putting a cap. I don't think it's in the city's... I really do believe that the city has taken a PR position, and rather than doing an outreach, which is one of the biggest difficulties that I have with this, I didn't get involved in this until the past number of months when I found out what the expense that we were dealing with. And people are just not aware of that at all. And there has not been an active outreach to let people know what they are dealing with. This project has been around in various phases, as discussed here, and yet the vast majority of the people out there have no idea what they are dealing with. So I think a very active outreach program is the first thing, and I love the idea of a pause on this, as Mr. Heller said. Thank you.
Anybody else? I knew there was a couple of you out there. There's a good crowd.
My name's Paula Radke. I've been in this town almost 30 years. I took a look at the 218 literature online that happened in May of 2015. And I'm confused how, I guess you can do whatever you want, but there will be two 218s concurrently if another one goes through. This one promises to restore and balance our budgets, to take care of our infrastructure needs, and it promises a $75 million wastewater treatment facility. Where's the money? Where is that money? Thank you.
My name is Dan Glessman, I'm a Morro Bay resident. I just had two observations. The first one is that the residential impacts here have been discussed, but keep in mind our economy is a visitor-serving one. So you have your motels, your restaurants, and when they get hit with these bills, their prices are going to go up. Do the people keep coming? We can outprice ourselves. The second one is that on these different options, what I've heard is you get it built and there it is, okay? You got to operate it. So I want to see the operating costs because, for example, pumping material from Atascadero Road on over the hill, that's a large cost, and the maintenance thereof too. So I want to see the comparison on operating costs included. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else out there? Last chance, going once, going twice. Okay, back to us. Thank you, folks, for your comments. Any follow-up based on comments from the public or staff? Do you have any questions that jumped out at you that you'd like to answer?
Just a little bit about our last Prop 218 rate increase. The primary impetus for that rate increase was water rates. Water rates had not been increased since the mid-90s. We were operating the year before the increase with $900,000 out of our water fund to pay operational costs. It was unsustainable to have that rate. We weren't meeting our debt coverage ratio for our state water bonds, so that needed to be increased. The project that was included for wastewater with that rate increase was to point the rates in the right direction. It was a $75 million project. There was no facilities master plan, and at that point in time, Cayucas was a partner. So it was really a $56 million wastewater treatment plant project. That was the basis of that rate increase. Just wanted to clarify that.
So, can I ask you something, Rob? So are you saying that there was no infrastructure allotment for that?
Oh, yeah, we have our standard capital improvement projects that included, on the water side, Nutmeg water tank replacement, pump station upgrades, regular routine maintenance. On the wastewater side, everything from the Embarcadero main to the Main Street line, Atascadero Road line replacements. So those were included in that rate increase also.
Okay, so that 60/40 main, that's the reason why I'm bringing this up. At the last Planning Commission meeting, there was a project that we were addressing, and one of the projects was tying into an already surcharging infrastructure, and that's the 60/40 line that's susceptible to leaking sewage into our drinking water aquifer. So the question was, I was talking at that meeting, I was talking with the community development director, and he alluded to saying that that was part of the WRF project, that's why it was on hold. And that's part of the confusion that people have, is the project keeps morphing in and out of what what the project is. It starts off as a sewer plant, then it morphs into a corporate yard and a water buildings, and people aren't aware of what is really happening here. And I think that is one of the big problems that we're having, and the confusion that the people are having as far as what the project is, and keeping it tight to that. And in addition, there's the Coastal Commission letter that states that that we were supposed to address that 60/40 line, particularly with this upgrade back in 2009 and 10. That's from Matt Watson.
Okay, and were you going to respond? Okay.
Just to say that the 60/40 line is the only reason it's included when we describe the project is a matter of convenience and timing. It makes sense to do it when we do the project, in our view.
Look, let me make something clear to the public here, okay? One of the things, this is a challenge, and these are some of the reports that are referenced in our facilities master plan is a CLEAT study. The CLEAT study shows, first of all, stated that the MTBE issue was not part of the nitrate issues that we have in our Morro Basin aquifer, okay? In the Planning Commission meeting, you stated that, it could have been MTBE from the Morro Valley. The MTBE is an additive to gas that's used in gasoline. So I doubt the farmers had MTBE out there. Now, the evidence that the city in that report showed was that the nitrates were coming from the Morro Valley farming operations. And sewage was a letter to the regional board that was ruled out. 5 years later, you were proven wrong, okay? The staff was proven wrong because we found sucralose, which is an identifier of sewage in drinking water, and the reason why you would do that is if you suspect it. So my whole issue here is that this project should be incorporating that issue in one shot. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong here, but you're saying that, it's convenient to do it as we do the project. Look, today, right now, we have sewage entering our drinking water aquifer right now. And it has been since 2008, since you've known about it. And I realized that in your staff report, and when you went to the city council, you stated that, you care about the community just like everybody else. But at the end of the day, you and then maybe Mr. Nunley and Mr. John Rickenbach, who don't live in the city, you can't say you have sewage in your drinking water, but we can say we have it in here. So the issue that I'm talking about is that why we postpone this stuff, it's happening right now. And we need to address it. We need to get off and address this issue. And, you wrote a letter back in 2008 that you were going to do it in the capital improvements at that time. And here we are, 2017, it hasn't happened yet.
Just want to clarify, we met with the regional board at one of their board meetings, and they basically concluded that the leaking sewer pipes are not a significant issue as a threat to groundwater.
And so I'm going to play referee here for a minute. We're getting off topic. We don't have much time left, and this is not
This is not what they said. They said that we had plenty of water, but they didn't say that it was not a non-issue. That's a misstatement there. That's deceitful.
So we have a difference of opinion.
We have a difference of opinion.
And we're moving on to the subject. That's a lot of reading. Okay, so we're moving forward here, and we have two options in front of us. Two directions in front of us. One is to provide input about the report, which we've sort of done. I want to make sure everybody is covered there. And then two, there's some recommendations put in print that we can consider, or we can add to them to make recommendations to the city council.
Are we supposed to vote on those to send to the council?
We can do whatever we want. We can decide to vote on them or just give our opinion. We can try to figure it out. So I think, is that my understanding correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to make sure first everybody's gotten an opportunity to comment on the report for the City Council to hear.
Can I comment?
Please, make sure your microphone's on.
Move it really close. How's that? Okay. I just have some comments. I'll try to go through them quickly. I agree in the findings with the technical panel of experts as synthesized in the city and consultant reports. We do have various cost savings that were identified at the South Bay Boulevard site, bringing the cost closer to prior expectations. It's unlikely, however, if we do pursue South Bay Boulevard, that the recycle option, IPR, will be feasible in the future due to its high cost. If we can't afford it now, we will not be able to afford it in the future. I support looking at a location closer to the existing facility in anticipating of pursuing the recycle option, as recommended by the panel of experts. The likelihood of relocating at the existing plant may not be a feasible alternative, given prior concerns raised by the California Coastal Commission and the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And this is primarily in their review of our environmental document, draft environmental document. It is not likely that concerns regarding sea level rise have gone away, along with issues related to tsunami vulnerability, storm surge, and the 100-foot floodplain. The 2009 EIR was based on a projected sea level of 20 to 23 inches by the end of the century. The general plan, local coastal plan, currently being developed by the City of Morro Bay, is using a 2012 report that expects sea level rise to raise by 3 feet at the end of the century. According to the Ocean Protection Council, new studies reveal more dire predictions should pollution go unchecked. According to the Council, a new conservative sea level rise of 4 feet would account for 384 feet of loss of coastal beach in the next 70 years. A new worst-case scenario of 10 feet of sea level rise would lead to 800 feet loss of land, the equivalent of 2.5 football fields. Those figures are based on 1 inch of sea level rise equals 8 feet loss of beach. The effects of sea level rise is not the same in all areas, but subject to the shape of seafloor and the slope of the land. Therefore, any new evaluations will need to take into account the specifics of Morro Bay relative to current sea level projections. I would like to agree with the expert panel and the concerns of the city, as well as many of the residents, that the projected cost of $240, $250 for a combined sewer and water bill is more than the average ratepayer can handle. Putting it at about 6% of our income. It was my understanding that current EPA standard is 3% of income, and I think, John, you were saying it's at 4.5% at the state level. I wasn't clear on that.
Combined is 4.5.
Okay. The $670 million price tag for the IPR alternative at the South Bay Boulevard site is more than a community of 10,700 people with an average income of $50,000 can be expected to bear. And I think that's an important point, can be expected to bear. City staff and consultants have conducted a good faith effort to explore various project alternatives and locations. By moving it further away from our proposed new lift station and existing collection center, it has become an extremely expensive project. The expert panel recommends that we promote our new facility as a recycle water treatment plant, which would put us in a better position not only for SRF funds, but for grants in support of this component. In addition, the panel of experts supported the city's efforts to diversify our water portfolio. Dependence on state water as our only source of water is not a good option, given statewide reliability issues and the increased costs associated with maintenance of and the rebuilding of our aging state water infrastructure. In these times, it does seem wasteful to dump 1 million gallons of water a day into the ocean. That's if we go with a secondary treatment. But it is more than apparent that a city of our size and income level cannot support the full reclamation alternative at the proposed South Bay Boulevard site. I support city staff and consultant efforts to determine if there is an affordable alternative located closer to the core of town that provides recycle opportunities, thus allowing us to diversify our water portfolio. I recommend that discussions with the Regional Water Control Board and the Coastal Commission staff should be initiated as soon as possible. That's my comments on your reports.
Any other comments on the reports before we start looking for a recommendation?
This was more opinion on my part than anything else, but it comes out of the report. I'm sorry. And what I've heard tonight, and I think I spoke at an earlier meeting, I can't remember if it was PWAB with the rate structure that was going in or if it was WRFCAC. However, I think I heard the cap brought up many times on a price for this, and I think we do need to quantify a maximum do not exceed amount. Then you reverse engineer back to what we can afford to build and where. And, I mean, it started out, I joined this August panel to try and keep costs down. That was my sole comment, or my sole purpose when I came on this board. And I saw it going astray as they started going towards the South Bay Boulevard site, because the minute you move away from where the plan exists today, it's going to cost more, no doubt about it. People bring up the Cayucas costing a lot less. The reason it does, their collection system runs right by Toro Canyon Road. They do not have to haul their sewage anywhere. In this particular case, the further you move away, and if there are sites closer that can be ameliorated, I think you'd see the cost come down substantially. But I think you start with the cost of what this town can afford and then back into a project. And that would have been if I were king, that would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments on the report?
I had some recommendations, but I'm not sure how you're planning. I'm not sure how you're planning on.
I just want to make sure we all, and I have a few more comments on the report. I just want to make sure everyone's commented on the report and made their comments to the city council before we start talking about recommendations. So if you want to jump into recommendations, I'd just ask you to pause for 1 second, and we'll get to them in a second.
Sort of half comments, half recommendations, whatever you want.
Well, let me wrap up my comments on the project, and then we'll go to you if you have a hybrid. Okay. Is that okay? Thanks.
Sorry, I jumped around.
No, that's fine. So my comments on the report, I want to thank the professionals that did this and took the time to spend a day looking at this for us. They didn't have to, and they did as a benefit to the community, which I appreciate. It just concerns me that they went beyond the scope and came into that not prepared, and I think you can see that by the questions they asked about CMC and Los Osos. They weren't prepared to look at other sites. They were prepared to look at cost. And so anything beyond cost, my recommendation to the city council is take that with a grain of salt, because they weren't prepared to discuss that. That was just off-the-cuff comments by them, and some of them, like MHI, are incorrect. And the fact that they were brainstorming sites that we've already explored through a screening process years ago tells me they weren't prepared for that discussion. So cost was what they were focused on, and costs are what they said are accurate. And that's why we took this last pause, was to find out, have a third party look at our cost estimates and tell us, are we on or not? And they said we are on. So that's a good thing. Now, where we're at with this is we've continued to move away from the site. We were told, first off, that $36 million plant, that coastal development permit was denied by the city's planning commission. Then the Coastal Commission staff report recommended denial, and then the Coastal Commission denied it. So that's history. And it scares me as a ratepayer to even go back to considering that site. There's a reason why Cayucas isn't proposed building on that site. They know you're not going to get a coastal development permit. And so the chances of us getting that via a Hail Mary pass are next to none, and I don't think it's worth the $30 a month savings to take another pause to approach that, because this is about our fourth pause we've taken, and we keep moving. We've looked at other sites that are more affordable, but we move away from them. So I'm hesitant to move forward with another site based on recommendations in this report. I think City Council, when you look at this report, look at it just from their analysis of the costs, not from the other stuff they're saying, because they weren't prepared to make those comments, in my opinion. Okay, so Jenny, if you want to go.
Okay, well, I agree with Valerie, and can people hear me now? Maybe it's broken. Is this better? Okay. So I agree with my colleague Valerie in that, and some of my other colleagues, that really the rate right now is unattainable. And I appreciate all the work that went into this report, and I was delighted, as I mentioned earlier, that there were some cost savings. I'm hopeful, though, that we could do, I think somebody recommended we need to do more of this. I'm hoping that maybe another day will get us additional cost savings if we could reconvene this group or another group. But what I wanted to mention was I'm not saying that I'm supporting the current or the location where our current wastewater treatment plant is, but in fact, if this is feasible, I really would think that you ought to get together with the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the California Coastal Commission as soon as possible to nail this down. Is it at all feasible, or is it what we've been talking about for the last 3 years, that it's off the table? But if the CCC and the regional board are willing to proceed in that unlikely circumstance, but if they're willing to proceed to the existing location, I would suggest that this you get this in writing, and before determining whether the city should build the WRF at the existing location, I would want to know what the legal ramifications are from withdrawing, if there are any, withdrawing from the MOU with the owner of the South Bay property. What are the additional costs to produce a refined cost estimate and to revise the draft financial and rate analysis, the draft FMP, the MWRP, and the EIR, and how would the project schedule change? So I know you had mentioned earlier, Mike, that this would entail a lot of work, but I'd want to see this quantified. But at this point, I'm assuming we're still going ahead with the South Bay site.
Can I quickly get a motion to go past 5, please?
I'll make a motion to go past 5.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Unanimous. Thank you. Okay. So are we going to make a recommendation to the City Council on one of these, on continuing with South Bay, to revise South Bay, or to explore a site at or near the existing wastewater treatment plant? Let's have that discussion now.
In my opinion, I would like to see them explore the least expensive for the ratepayers and see how can we do that? We take the courtyard out of the picture, we take the admin building out of the picture. Maybe we can find a small location that's closer. And I don't know that necessarily being closer to the ocean is a good thing. I don't know anything about
I'm just going to say it because I think we have to. I agree 100%. We've done the siting analysis. That other site is Rigetti. and we talked about Rigetti for a while, and Rigetti had residents that live nearby that came forward and said they weren't interested in having a wastewater treatment plant by them. So we talked for a long time about potentially moving the site from there, knowing the cost would go up. We went out to the community and said, the cost will go up if we move the South Bay. And there was crickets here, right? I mean, I think everyone can recognize that. And here we are at South Bay, and now we're hearing about the cost. So I don't want to recommend we take a pause and look for another site, because we know what sites are available. We've done that work, so we got to pick a site.
So what if, since we've downscaled it, what about the Rancho Calinas site? And the reason why Mr. McIlvain, is because of the courtyard and the admin building. What if we just, do we just need a simple plant for the citizens? I mean, what would be wrong with that? Because we already explored that side as well. I mean, direct city council.
And I'm not saying no to that. I would defer to staff them, just make sure, because I think you're right, Dale. The reason why, the owner also switched locations on where he wanted the plant, which brought up visibility concerns and permitting with the Coastal Commission, and that was one of the drivers behind switching as well. Is that correct?
Was just because of the larger size, though, right?
I don't think it was because of the larger. I think we'll let them explain, but it also put it next to the RV park.
I don't have a problem going along with the recommendations as stated here, because one of the reasons is they talk about, depending on the outcome of the exercise, the city council may want to direct staff to take steps to clarify an appropriate site. All you're doing is going back to the city council so you could get more direction. Is that correct, Rob? That's the way I'm reading your recommendation on the last page.
Right now, the site that has been selected is the South Bay Boulevard site, with all of the goals. If to change the project costs, it's a math problem. Yeah. Site plus goals equal the cost.
Right.
So something has to change to change the outcome.
But what I'm seeing in your recommendation is you're basically asking, to go back to the city council to direct staff and the program management team to provide a refined cost estimate for building the new WRF. And then depending on the outcome, if it's cost too much, then they're going to give you further direction on either changing site or changing the scale of the operation. That's how I read your recommendation, unless I'm missing.
I would say that's essentially about right. I think if the idea is to direct or ask council and have them want to explore something at or near the site, the existing treatment plant site, part and parcel to that would be, let's find out if that's even a possibility. I think that's where you start. I think by exploring the question with the regional board and coastal commission, and present, go from there. So you don't go too far down a road that may not be supportable. But we have not been asked to do that yet, so we don't know the answer to that.
And that's why I'm saying I can support the recommendations that are being put forward.
Of C.
What's that?
Of 2C is what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm talking of the Oh, I'm sorry.
Because there's options there. There's A, B, and C.
Yeah.
So you're saying C.
Yeah, I have no problem with the recommendation shown. Maybe I'm missing something. Are you saying that...
Recommendation C.
It's either A, B, or C.
Oh, it's either A, B, or
we make up our own.
Oh, okay. I'd say C. Sorry.
Okay, that's good clarification.
I thought they were adding the SAL as a recommendation.
And I just have a problem supporting C because we know, we're pretty sure we know the answer. We have, that it was a unanimous denial of the CDP locally. It was a staff report that said the project proposed was in conflict with our LCP, and our LCP hasn't changed, and the Coastal Act hasn't changed. And then the Coastal Commission unanimously voted against it. So those factors haven't changed at all. None of those have. Nothing has changed that will change that decision. And doing another pause, which we were on like our fourth or fifth pause now, that costs money as well. And at some point, we have to make a decision, and it's going to be the hardest decision of this project is picking that site. And that's what we're kicking down the road, is that decision. And as a ratepayer, I'm tired of it because we're doing ourselves a disservice by continuing to go with no decision, and we're going to have to make one at some point.
What about if we recommended at least a preliminary meeting with the regional board and the California Coastal Commission to get their opinion on this, and don't make a pause, just have this within the next couple of weeks, and if the answer is no, then we would go ahead and we would go with A, except for I would say, in addition, look for other opportunities to cut costs. I'm sure they're out there. So we're not recommending going to, we can't recommend at this point going to the current site, because based on all the information we have, as you pointed out, we've been denied going there. Now, it may be that there's new membership in the Coastal Commission. Same thing with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. There's a new director. It may very well be that they've changed their minds. At least we can go back and find that out. But if they stay the course, then we just proceed as we have been with A, right?
Potentially. How quickly do you think you could get a non-committed opinion from Coastal Commission staff?
Next to impossible, I would say. They're going to want to see
numbers.
From my experience with regulatory agencies, they don't like to provide input on fiction. So we have to provide them with some sort of proposal of what it would look like there before we would get any input on it. I would venture to guess that if we asked them outright, would you look at something, they would say yes, they would look at it. But they're not going to give us any valuable opinion until we do some work. We would have to do a lot of homework.
And that costs money.
That costs money and costs time.
Mm-hmm.
So can I ask, John, if you're going with, you're assuming 2A is the one that you wish to go with, correct?
No, 2B, I think.
2B,
2B.
okay, refine the community.
Mm-hmm.
To modify accordingly. Oh, at the South Bay site.
Yeah, to be brutally honest, I would prefer us revisiting Rigetti, but I don't know if there's a will to do that right now. And the community has said we'll pay more for a site other than Rigetti, and now the community's upset about that. So it's a lose-lose situation for us, unfortunately, and South Bay seems to be the site.
I can support B only because it says direct staff to modify the project accordingly. And as long as that's the option in there, because I think the price needs to come down. I really do. I think you're at that 6%. You're saying 4.5. I'd love to see them start a number closer to that and then back into a project that can be afforded.
And to interject a concept in here too, that part of the purpose of the council providing direction to look at options at South Bay Boulevard that were really phase one only type options, that's one example of a possible modified project. There are other possibilities, but those are among them that sort of satisfy that option B concept.
Well, I noticed when you brought it up in the report about the Knox ditch out there at this, I don't know how you do it. The ground is so unlevel. I'm not sure how you'd fit it into that site. You're already worried about the grading, as I remember.
Yeah, anything out there requires...
Yeah, I don't see that as a viable option, I guess, in my own
even with MBR, it requires grading. So,
yeah. But there are smaller footprints in an ox ditch.
Yeah. You know, Hurricane Sandy in New York, they didn't move their plant. They couldn't. There's a bunch of studies that came out on how to sea level rise and climate change proof your critical infrastructure. In Oregon, they did it. It's a resiliency program. And I presented this a year ago to you guys. I told you about it. Looking at a site near, they're saying, to the wastewater treatment plant, like the Hanson's concrete site. You could leave the existing plant, could be operational, and it'd be tied in. The Coastal Commission didn't say you have to go 10 miles inland. The Rigetti site was never supposed to be on the table. That never rose in those meetings back in 2009 to a level that it was even to be considered. Okay, that was something that was just slipped in after we started looking at Rancho Colina. I feel strongly that I don't agree with you as far as getting together with the Coastal Commission and maybe the Ocean Protection Council as well, and having a meeting and telling them what we want to do at that particular site and how we're going to make it more resilient to sea level rise. Regarding your LCP, we're going to need an LCP modification anyway, because we're putting a lift, for the South Bay site, we're putting a lift station the size of a small house in the ground right there. And so the logic of moving, the whole premise of moving the critical infrastructure was sea level rise and climate change, and we're putting in and replacing it with other more critical as far as from a health standpoint. So I would strongly suggest that to look at a site near the plant right now. The numbers that I think that you guys have are way off, because the numbers that we had from before should be in the 38-40 million range. That should be our cap. We should have a cap of about 40 to 50 million. Now, the other thing is regarding the 218. I think that we need to have some accountability before we should freeze all spending on any project, and let's get a detailed accountability where our money went so far. With regards to our original 218 vote, we should have enough money right now to deal with, to do the plant right now, and fix the infrastructure.
Okay, so I've heard from almost everybody. Let's try to rein this in. I would be supportive of a pause, even though that upsets me deeply, and I'm going to throw out 2 months of giving staff the opportunity to reach out to Coastal and the regional board and say, what if we were to propose at the existing site, what would you say? And get an up or down from them. And if it's a up, obviously we would revisit what that would be. But if it's a down, I would like us to give clear direction on what our other alternative would be. And if it's to be here, then we need to also work on some modifications to the project. So discussion on
or near to existing site or near to.
We've done the analysis, and
no,
the only we did a rough screening and a fine screening of all the potential sites. And
no, we haven't.
Staff, have we done a rough screening and a fine screening? How many sites did we start with when we first looked at this?
It's roughly 17 or so. The question, though, I think that's in the air is about what does it mean to be near or at the existing site. There was the existing site. The nearest other site that was looked at in the rough screening, I think, was part of the power plant site.
Right.
But there wasn't any other site in that proximity that was considered in the rough or fine screening analysis.
Right.
So if they say yes, because we'll show them the area, and if they say yes, then we'll look at something. But there's nothing near. There's at, which is the entire, like Lila Kaiser, the entire area, and then near would be like the power plant or Rigetti.
No, and the Hanson site is near. It's the city owns that property.
Right, I consider that adjacent too. That's part of the existing site. That whole area is, and that's what we would be asking them, is if that's okay.
To clarify, I think the intent of what was meant by at or near was either at the site or in the general proximity, more or less in an area where a lift station isn't needed. For example, Rigetti isn't exactly near in that context. Something that's in the general neighborhood that has similar characteristics relative to infrastructure extension. So if we worked with those agencies, I think we draw a line on a map that sort of generally describes an idea.
I think
that's
west of Highway 1 and adjacent to the creek.
Something like that.
I think we're all on the same page here, Richard. Just so you know, I agree. Okay, so time frame.
2-month pause on option C, correct?
Yes.
My question is excuse me, I'm so sorry. Rob, My question is that if we do a 2-month pause, is that sufficient, and Mike, to pull together the detail that you would need to be able to have that discussion with Coastal? Like you said, and I would think that the Water Board as well, really don't want to talk about all the what ifs or whatever. They would rather see something that's more concrete and more fully developed. Is the 2 months sufficient amount of time to pull that information together and have that meeting?
I don't even know if that's a long process to pull that information. This is just simply, is it in conflict with the LCP, and is it? Would you write a supportive staff report or say no, regardless of what it looked like, because it's going to look like what we proposed prior or currently?
Well, I think that the city wants to have the opportunity to show that we have explored all these other options. And in order to do what we want to do, whether at the South Bay Boulevard site, whether it's secondary only or IPR or the full or tertiary, it's very, very expensive.
I think
you want to show the good faith effort that we've gone through, and that there's a potential for something someplace else that's closer, that was rejected, but it's something we can afford.
If we're serious about staying at or near the existing site, we have to show something that's substantially different from the previous project, a more compact design. So we need to be able to show that. I just don't think asking the question, is it feasible or not feasible? I think they're going to say, yes, continue to move forward until we show them those, at least some details about what impact it would have on the site. I don't think we're just going to get any valuable impact by just going with a blank sheet of paper to them.
I think
unless the answer is no. I guess if they would say no, then that would be an answer. But I just, from my previous experience, they're reluctant to say no without seeing something.
I think that one of the things that they're looking at a more compact design, all the savings that we can make, but also the fact promoting it as a water recycle, as a water recycle or treatment, and playing that against losing that ability by moving further out. Because that was one of the criticisms of the earlier environmental document for the project, is that we really didn't have any kind of recycle or reclamation built into the project in any meaningful sort of way. And like I said before, I truly believe if we build at South Bay Boulevard, we're not going to develop the recycle component. But I think, that's the seller. That's the selling point to the Coastal Commission. That's what we can provide.
I think, and all good points, to answer the question on the timing, I'll let Mike speak to that for a second, but my thought on approaching, the short-term approach to, say, Coastal Commission would be, are there conditions, parameters that end up in yes? What is it that you would need to have? Is it recycled water? Is it something? Do you need managed retreat? If you need that, does that make it a no? We can try to set up criteria and hope to get an answer, but there's some unknowns in the timing of all that, because they may want to know more before they can get to that.
I think it's also a big factor here is that you guys didn't take into O&M costs, right? Operations and maintenance costs of the South Bay Boulevard site, correct? Those weren't taken into account in your figures.
They are in the rate study. So they're in the original rate, the rate study.
Yeah, but in this comparison and what we're talking about here.
We did not adjust the O&M costs. That's correct. Well, but all we try to do is define a range.
Okay,
because,
now,
again, we need direction from council to look at this.
Right. So what we have to look at, too, though, is after you get everything built, then you got the O&M costs. Then you got to have to have more collection people. You're going to have, you got a lot more infrastructure. You got, first responders on call. All these things affect people's rates. And so the benefit of not having a huge lift station, the benefit of having that location, these are things that you should be able to present to the Coastal Commission. Another thing that the Coastal Commission's got to get a little more educated on, because I've talked to them, and then I followed up with a talk with a gentleman from the Ocean Protection Council, is the state of California has taken AB 32 very seriously, okay? And when we start, AB 32 is the greenhouse gas sequestration bill, okay, or greenhouse gas bill. The amount of energy to pump all that sewage all over the place. That's a factor that needs to be taken. Now, I've talked to Coastal, and they say, well, we don't take that into account as planners. Well, it might be something that you might, you might kind of enlighten them that this is part of the variables that we're addressing, and these end up being direct costs to the citizens and ratepayers. And I look at like, this is something that I've said from the beginning. We could be right up on top for getting grants funding if we address our drinking Morro Basin drinking water aquifer issue. It'll take us right to the top, and we can get grant funding. I would venture to say we can get a big part of this project paid for, because we would be working towards that goal of sustainable water. Right now, we got to run it through the desal plant. So I mean, all that is a huge factor of getting it near or at the current location. I would also, again, reiterate what I said about a year ago, looking at what New York did, looking at what Oregon did with regards to the resiliency program that they did after Hurricane Sandy and in the East Coast, and what happened here in Oregon as far as the liquefaction issues.
So let's go back. I want to stick with the 2 months, and I think in reality, staff probably has we're recommending this to the city council. Staff's going to have an opportunity to reach out to Coastal and say, is 2 months feasible or not? And they'll hopefully be able to go to the council and say, yeah, 2 months, or it's going to take 3 or 4. And council would, I think, make the appropriate decision. I just want to emphasize to council it shouldn't be a long pause, because these long pauses are costing us money as well, and we're down to the big decision, and it's easy to keep kicking the can, and we can't. So I would like to see it be short. So I'd like to make a straw vote. Is 2 months a reasonable amount of time to have an answer on that site, or we move on? Okay, I'm seeing yeses on that. Now, what on 2B? What do we want to? How do we want to refine the community goals and modify the project? They gave us some alternatives to consider, like Reclamation Ready was alternative 2. I would be supportive of alternative 2, where we're Reclamation Ready, and where the corp yard and other elements are taken out of the project to refine costs. There has to be an admin building.
So we're going to do it on all 3 options? We'll give recommendations? Is that?
No, I think it's just we're saying that I'm sorry, I missed. What I'm building up to here is that we're recommending a pause for 2 months to find out if there's any feasibility at or near the existing site.
Oh, okay.
And then if it's a yes, that will come back to us for exploration.
Oh, okay.
If it's a no, if it's a clear no from them, then we're continuing with South Bay with modifications.
Oh, okay. Is that a motion?
That can be a motion.
I think that we should just stop and before we look at South Bay, let's find out, let's do one step at a time. Take a pause, send these guys over to Coastal and Regional Board, and then come back with that. And after that, then we can discuss from there.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion and we'll see where it ends up. So my motion is that we recommend to the City Council that they explore the feasibility of construction of a wastewater treatment plant at or near the existing site, that time should not exceed 2 months, and if it's going to take longer than 2 months or it's a no, we move forward with the project at the South Bay site, refining it to eliminate the add-ons that are not related to the wastewater treatment plant, and to make it alternative 2, which is Reclamation Ready.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion on the motion or clarification? Staff, do you have a clear take of the motion? Okay, any discussion?
Okay, can you go over that again, exactly how you're presenting it. You're presenting recommending the staff recommend looking at an existing site close or near, right? And taking a pause for 2 months and then coming back here.
Up to 2 months. If Coastal comes back in a week, then yeah.
Yeah. And then as far as the South Bay site, we're not talking about that right now.
No, we are. If it's a no, if Coastal says no, you can't construct there, then we move on with the South Bay site. That's our. We've gone.
That's your motion.
2
you
years.
tied the two together.
Yep.
Can you have them separate?
No, we can vote on it. There's a motion and a second on the table, so we'll vote on it.
I did want to ask, did you mean by Oh, I'm sorry. Did you mean by reclamation ready for any one specific project, secondary or tertiary?
The staff report had alternative 2. It was in the presentation as well. That was my intention. Let's make sure everyone's on the same page.
And that is the tertiary version, the alternative 2.
All right,
secondary was alternative 1, tertiary was
okay,
alternative 2.
so the tertiary.
Yeah, because we gain an economy of scale, and it costs more, but we save money by doing it all at once. So it's a wise use of funds.
Okay. And then can we just clarify again what the tertiary water is going to be treated, what it's going to be used for? And how many acre feet we're going to be generating and what our use is going to be?
So tertiary water does not meet the reclaimed water standards, so it would be discharged to the ocean until there is a reclaimed water project.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. We're still done.
Okay, so any other comments? And, roll call vote, I suppose, if you don't mind.
Not at all. Chair Diodati?
Yes.
Commissioner Fulton?
Yes.
Commissioner Garelick? Yes. Commissioner Sadowski?
Yes.
Commissioner Leviolette?
Yes.
Commissioner Shively?
Yes.
Commissioner Guerra?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Hey, all right. Let's find the agenda so we can get back on track and get out of here. We have any closing comments by committee members?
I have a comment. This for the public's info, this project's been going on for a long time. I would suggest that you get on, there's a website called www.morrowbaywrf.info. And if you get on that website, there's a recommended solutions. Now, one of the recommended solutions talks about the Hansen site. And that's the concrete site that's near there. It's about 4 feet higher. And then the other thing is get on the Citizens for Affordable Living at gmail.com. Get on that email list and try to get informed on what is really happening here. And that's it for now.
Okay. I want to thank everyone for coming out. It's nice to have some public comment. We've had a lot of meetings where no one's been here. And so thank you for coming out and expressing your opinions and providing input on the project. I think it's part of the process, and it's definitely helped shape where we've gone over the last 2 years. And at the end of the day, we'll have a good project. I hope you feel listened to, that you've guided the process today, and at the end of the day, wherever we end up, you can get on board and support the project, because we knew from day one it was going to cost more, and that's just the unfortunate reality of it, and we're going to just try to minimize those costs and get a good project in the ground so we can start using it. So with that, we adjourn, and we'll be back here in the Vets building August 1st, 2017 at 3 p.m. Thank you.